All right, we might get underway. Welcome back, everyone. First up, we'll go back to item 11, the community application for the Capital Endowment Fund. Do you both want to run through, give us an overview, and then we can take questions? And I don't know who we've got on Zoom, but
Just Yanni at the stage.
so we've got Yanni on Zoom. You there, Yanni?
This is more.
Happy to move when we get there.
Okay, great. So you got that, David. So
Yeah,
Sarah's happy to second it. Yep. Cool.
This is an application for up to $50,000 from the Capital Endowment Fund to serve as a de facto underwrite to allow the Central City Business Association to continue the provision of, we've called them security guards, but our email to councillors yesterday will give you a little bit more feel for what they are. It allows them to continue this whilst the decision is being made over the council's application for Three Waters Better Off grant funding, which in that application contains funds that council can use for a long-term arrangement. So this is a interim, it's an underwrite. The worst case scenario, we don't get Better Off funding for that. There's an expenditure. The best case scenario is in 3 or 4 weeks' time, any money handed out is repaid in full. Gary and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. That's really useful. Do we have any? Well, I know we've got a mover and a seconder. Celeste got a question, and then Yanni. Or did you have a question? No, Celeste and then Yanni.
Can you clarify are you aware of which area the security patrols will cover?
Yep. So for this recommendation, it is basically from the square south to Sinasif Street, across to this side of the river. Well, I forgot whatever that street is called there, Durham, through to Manchester. So it really is the inner city block.
So would it be fair to say then that the Salt District is outside of that, plus the square? Is that right?
The Salt District is outside it, yes. Yep.
So, in simple terms, the roving security patrols and... Yep. Sure, sorry. The roving patrols would cover more of the Riverside Market, Cashel Street area.
Through Colombo, Manchester, up that way, yes.
Right, okay. From your perspective, when people are moved on, where do you think they end up generally? Like if the patrol's about sort of moving on people, do you have any sense of where some of the issues might be redirected?
So I think the mission are doing a great job dealing with those people who are keen to be housed, and so they've made some great ground around housing. The facts would say, because I don't have an opinion, but the facts would say that we are seeing more people out east. We are seeing more people up in Papanui. We're seeing more people at the sale yards. So really yes, they have come out of the city, a number of them, and they have spread to other areas.
Right, so be fair to say that this could risk moving on the problem to other areas of the city which don't have funding for patrols currently. Would that be,
I don't think you can ask
Okay.
Gary
No,
or I
that's
to
fine.
say that on a capital funding. That's, yeah, that would be an opinion that we're not qualified to give.
And is this, because obviously this is a grant that will be repaid,
Yes.
but it's we've already paid for a trial, so we're effectively continuing funding for a project that we've already funded and agreed that we couldn't do on a sort of longer term basis. So we're actually looking at continuing that. This particular bit will be repaid, but it's being repaid out of money that's coming to council anyway.
Yeah, so in terms of the trial, we at that point in the middle of last year, there was a whole lot of stuff going on in the city, and we had to look at other options. So yes, council did fund from a harm reduction budget the trial. At the end of that trial, during the trial, it was made clear that there was no ongoing application or no ongoing funding. Yeah, I guess you can say that it is a continuation.
I guess final.
Councillor Donovan, I think the significant thing is the council have made, through councillor guidance, an application to better off funding for this purpose, and this is merely the purpose of this is an underwrite to allow this service to continue. It's not a continuation of a trial. We have moved on since then.
Okay, no, that's good. I just wanted to clarify because
Yeah.
there would be a risk that we fund this project and it creates problems in other areas which we haven't got similar schemes that then can support those communities. And I'm aware that some of
So it's probably questions at the moment, Celeste,
Sure.
if there's a question in that.
So thank you. That's great.
Right. Okay, Yanni, and then, Yanni?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in terms of the better off funding. What was the actual thing that we, the purpose of what we put towards addressing antisocial behaviour? Did it specifically cover security guards, or what was it for?
Let me have a read. Develop partnership service agreement with youth safety organisation, delivered agreed cross-agency initiatives programs. So it's a very, very broad description. You probably had access to this information. I'm just reading the spreadsheet that came through. $1.97 million across 3 years, split into 3 lots of $656,667 per year for 3 years. So I think it was a range of initiatives.
Right, and just, sorry, it's a bit hard with all the documents, but how is that spread across the different community board areas, and how is that going to be allocated based on need?
Again, I'm just conscious that I'm now really speaking.
I think, Yanni, what John's probably trying to politely say is we agreed on that when we agreed how we would apply for the funding. So have you got another question?
Oh, well, I guess if I just raised
another different question.
Yeah, well, effectively, why can we not use like discretionary funding to do this? Why do we need to use the endowment fund? And given the concern that's been raised around the displacement, do we have any discretionary funding like we did with this initiative to begin that we can put forward to counteracting any effects of displacement in other communities?
So Yanni, stop. No, I'm sorry. I know the point you're trying to make, and it's not invalid. But this one is literally dealing with $50,000 from the Capital Endowment Fund for a specific item. So the other stuff you can talk offline with Gary and John. But if it's related to, and I think the first question was valid, which is why would you use capital endowment as opposed to discretionary response? So could you just answer that question?
Yeah.
No, Yanni, stop. Right, if they can answer the question.
Yeah, this fund is more appropriate because part of the outcomes that we see of this are economic. They allow part of the outcomes. They allow for a safe and pleasant experience in the central city, particularly businesses recovering from COVID. The Capital Endowment Fund has a split between community and economic, and in our opinion, it is the correct one to use because of the application criteria. We haven't had an application for the discretionary response fund, and we anticipate that fund probably having more community uses and being maybe a little oversubscribed by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody? Great, so we're going to move on in a second. Oh, sorry, Tyrone. We talked about it too.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So just with my social worker registration and a membership of the ANZASW, sorry, my code of ethics obliges me to vote against this. So I'm just signalling that in advance because, yeah, my interpretation of my obligation as a social worker is, yep, that's where I'm sitting.
No worries, thanks for raising that. Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion? Celeste? Yep. So we'll just get the timer up too. Great.
I mean, I understand where this is coming from. I understand the sense that there is safety issues in the mall, and I understand that that's a need that needs to be addressed. I don't agree that this is the right solution. The CCBA is asking for funding for roving security patrols to effectively move on issues from the area. It could be that those issues get moved to other parts of the city, or more likely those issues will be moved to other parts of the city which already have their own issues. And we don't currently have in place in those other parts of the city mechanisms to deal with this extra layer of social harm. The second point, I think, which is important to remember, is that the CCBA have their own sources of funding within levies that they put on businesses within those areas. Those businesses are reasonably well resourced within the Riverside Market and the Cashel Lane area. So I think it would be more appropriate for organisations to look at whatever initiatives that they put forward that they can fund them themselves, and that we don't socialise the costs that actually are benefiting private business. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this today.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I have some concerns that, you know, the council is effectively picking up a policing role, but, you know, when I looked at the details that the staff have put forward around the role of the guards to actually engage and collaborate with stakeholders, including City Mission, Salvation Army, then, you know, I understand that this is a reassurance thing that we're doing in the short term. So I'm comfortable in that. I think there is a need for it. My sadness is that we're not taking a big picture approach as a city council and looking at the wider areas that also are having problems. And I've got, for everything that's been described by the central city businesses, I've got the same things that's been happening in Phillipstown. I've got the same thing that's happening in Woolston. I've got the same thing happening in Eastgate. I've got the same thing I've seen in New Brighton. So, you know, I think as a council, we urgently need to think about a strategy to try to encourage or change the perception and the reality that people are feeling unsafe. And in our local suburban areas, who have often struggled to get resources to deal with it, it's not okay just to continuously fund the central city and forget about the impact that that's having in terms of moving people further and further east into areas of more socioeconomic disadvantage, and to raise a whole bunch of issues around crime and well-being. So I appreciate that this is a short-term solution. I appreciate that staff will work with the CCBA. I hope in doing that you can think about whether you can make it possible for those security guards to actually at some point go wider than just the central city, to look at the other areas, because just leaving it to the community in those areas to deal with is, in my view, not acceptable, and it's not fair, really. And we need to take a much more stronger focus on the inequity that exists in our city, and the areas that have the most need should be getting a prioritisation of resources.
Thank you. Look, I'm disappointed to hear some colleagues won't be supporting this initiative today. I find it a little bit ironic that they supported the package of citywide safety across the whole city, and yet when you want to pick out one, when it comes to underwriting one aspect of our city, our CBD, they choose not to support anything that isn't in their own ward. I think that's really sad, particularly when you think about this service and you look at what it does. Engages and assists vulnerable people, including working with police, City Mission, Salvation Army, supporting the visibility and presence of some of our young workers in the CBD. It's really, it's quite disappointing.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of happy to support this more as an investment than a cost, because a number of businesses are struggling around the behaviour of some individuals in the inner city, and that public realm area is the responsibility of us, along with policing and things. And, you know, we need to have a really serious look this year at the rough sleeping, vagrancy, the behaviours of some of the people that are in there. I mean, we need to deal with that. It is our space. These people are tenants in town, and I know the petition was started last week or the week before because one of these people walked into a shop and punched one of the staff in the face. And so their boss, not happy, has started a petition. So it won't be the last we hear of this. There's a long way to go. But what happens is when people are put off going to the inner city because of this behaviour and other areas like Yanni mentioned, you lose tenants because you can't run a business there, and then that will cost us as a council because of potential revenue we can be earning in those areas. It'll stop development. It's like any parts of the world where you have antisocial behaviour, the business districts drop off and you won't get development and you won't get rates income, and so it is harmful to us. So the amount that we're going to spend here is a bit of an investment, really, but we need to look at and talk with all social agencies about how we work our way forward and keep asking for more police to help police the areas.
Very quickly, Sam, thanks. Look, I just find this really sad because unfortunately we've got the data to show, how much of a problem we have. It's not good stats, we don't enjoy reading it, it's terrible, but it's a fact. And we've seen the data, and we've seen the data of how much this has helped. And this is of the program being run. So it's right in front of us. And it's the most collaborative and inclusive approach, that's currently underway, that is getting tangible results. It's helping people, it's inclusive, it's proactive. And I'm just astounded that anyone could vote against this or even for a moment argue against something that is quite literally addressing a problem and making people feel safer and helping us showcase Christchurch at its best. And we've got a solution there, we've got a working demonstration, there's an ability to help. I'm quite frankly horrified that anyone would vote against it. It just seems like it's just such a no-brainer.
So I'd just like to point out that I'm actually not against city safety. What I am against is the provision of council funding to employ security guards to deal with people who are at the most vulnerable people in our society. I actually had a profession before I was a city councillor, and that was as a social worker, and I have an ethical and moral code to uphold. So unless you're suggesting that I should abandon my ethical principles on that, I find it incredibly disrespectful that you would say, that people would call me out for voting against this. I'm affronted and offended by that. And so I just want to point out I am not against safety. These are people who need drug and alcohol support. They are people that need our care and attention. We are talking about them in terms of being a problem and of people getting in the way of us, of city businesses making money. That is not the way that we should be looking at this. That's outrageous. We should be taking care of our citizens, of our people. So that's why I'm voting against this.
Okay, look, just very, very briefly, I think these are really useful debates to have because it always highlights the difference of opinion around the table. But ultimately, what this paper is about is an advance on money we've already agreed to get from government in terms of the Better Off funding. So that is imminent. It will be spread across the city, looking at how we can actually help some of these problems. We acknowledge, in public realm, as Aaron mentioned, and James did as well, that actually this is a problem and we do need to play our part. We can agree or disagree on the means to get there, but in the end, this is a very small advance on money we are already getting from government. So I think people can vote obviously how they like, but I think in the interest of this, what the association have done has come to us with a solution. So I've said, actually, how do we bridge that gap, knowing that actually we've got a wider program across the city when that Better Off funding, if you're listening, Mr. Hipkins, is coming to us. So if we put that to a vote, all in favour say... Oh, do you want to conclude? Oh, sorry, Jake.
Hey, look, I just want to clarify. No one is calling you out, Tyrone. No one is... the calling out that has been done. Look, it's obvious that these are vulnerable people who need proper social support. This isn't an opportunity to offer that because they are security guards, as you quite rightly point out, but they are a touch point and a connector into social service agencies. That's better than nothing. Actually, the people who have been in this debate who have talked about these people being a problem and moving people on are the people, for example, Yanni and Linwood, who are saying they are a problem, don't move them to my ward. That's what I'm calling out, and I stand by that.
On that note, let's put it to a vote before we have a fight. So all in favour, say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
No. Great, so we've got Celeste and Tyrone. Yanni, were you a no or a yes?
I voted in support.
Oh, in support. Okay, that is, you're abstaining? And Melanie, did you get that, David? Yeah, and Yanni was a yes. Yeah, great. Okay, that is carried. Thank you both very much for turning that around. Okay.
Say a couple words at the start.
Yeah, that's
Just
fine.
want to talk about deliverability.
So we might get Jacob up and Lynette. So we're going to go to